Thank you so much for listening to my show. William Wallace for America with me today in this episode of my podcast and on Rumble and YouTube, where I just got reinstated, by the way, as you know, is a guest who's been on my show before, Michael Jonson with the Slavic Gospel Association. And but when he was on my show before, we talked about his organization and all the really good things that they do for people and today's time, the Ukraine. But what I think is important that you're going to get out of this interview is we're going to try to find out some things that the people that work for his organization are hearing actually from the Ukrainian people, things that are going on in the Ukraine that you are not hearing about in the media, precisely, and things that the people of the Ukraine are saying. These are all the things that we don't hear about in the media. And I think it's important, while you will be able to help the Slavic Gospel Association if you like. This interview is more to get information that you're not hearing about, things that they hear about because they're actually boots on the ground in the Ukraine. Michael Jonson, thank you so much for joining the show today. I appreciate you.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Well, before we get started, let's give a brief, minute on what you guys are doing that is putting you all on the front lines in the Ukraine and in the Ukraine itself, where the people that work for your organization are probably, and that's one of my questions, seeing war, seeing the real effects of war. What are you guys doing there in the Ukraine?
Well, our ministry was established in 1934, so we've been around for many years, and we started working in Ukraine, back in the 30s. And so we have a long history there, and we, as a ministry, we're a missions organization, but we don't send Western missionaries into those countries because it would be very difficult for them to, stay. So
Right.
we're connected with the largest group of evangelical churches in those countries, which is the Baptist churches, and throughout the former Soviet Union, as well as in Israel. We're connected with about 6,000 churches through which we can partner to minister to the people in those countries. So when we talk about our ministry, we talk about the fact that we're an equipping ministry, and we equip the churches with resources, financial resources, material resources, so that they can reach out to minister to the people in their country with the love of Christ. So we support their orphan ministries, their church planting ministries, their humanitarian aid distribution ministries, all for the purpose of meeting the physical needs of the people in those countries. And right now there's a revival taking place in Ukraine because of the acts of mercy of the evangelical churches. But also, obviously, it's an opportunity to share the love of Christ, the truth of the gospel. Many people have come to faith in Christ as a result of this partnership.
This is this is our segue where, we know the good works that you all are doing. And because of the good works, you're not only seeing the spiritual revival, but you're seeing the effects of war, which is probably part of the reason why there's a spiritual revival, because they see hope through your organization. But you mentioned, and I missed this in our last interview, you all have been in the Ukraine since 1934. Is that correct?
We have had ministry. We have supported ministry in Ukraine since 1934. Correct.
So this isn't just a mission that you guys are embarking on because of the war. This is something you all were already there with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
This is very interesting because I did a show a while back on the Budapest agreements. So then you all were there during when Russia, when basically Ukraine became its own country. So you all were there then. I'd love to get your perspective on that, or if you know of anything on that from that time, when Ukraine had to give up their nuclear arsenal, because that's where Russia kept their nuclear arsenal, was in Ukraine. And then there was the Budapest Agreement, where Ukraine was given assurances, not promises of protection, but given assurances through the Budapest Agreement, which I believe were not kept when Russia invaded the Ukraine. Do you know anything about this era?
In terms of the politics of that era, I have a basic idea of what's happened. There is, when you talk to the Ukrainian people about how they perceive the United States, they very much appreciate the United States. They very much appreciate our support for the Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian people in the midst of this conflict with Russia. They recognize the resources that we continue to send them to not only meet their physical needs, but also to prop up their economy. So the people in Ukraine are very appreciative of that. With regard to the other things that you mentioned, I think that there is some resentment, maybe some, I don't know what resentment, but a recognition of the fact that that we may have let them down in the specific circumstances that you referenced. So it's kind of mixed, I guess. I mean, some people feel that Trump has a loyalty to Russia that sort of drives his strategy. I don't happen to think that's true. But Trump is just trying to, put together a situation where there's peace between those two countries and the surrounding countries, because, as you know, Russia is very much of an expansionist country.
Right.
And so they're looking to Ukraine as the first step to then march into some of the other surrounding countries, whether it be Moldova or and I was in Moldova this past year, and they are concerned about expansion into their country because Russia has a stronghold into that little strip of land between Ukraine and Moldova called Transnistria, and so there are boots on the ground there with the Russian army. So they're watching us very closely with regard to steps that the Russians are taking to undermine the leadership in Ukraine. So obviously, when you look at what's happening now, with the drones and the missiles that are flying into Ukraine, the Ukrainian people certainly don't appreciate that. My friend Tim, who's with me in the studio today, he was there not too long ago, and you would think that you go through Ukraine and there's blown up buildings and so on and so forth. But he was saying that the Ukrainians are motivated enough to, once the bombs come in, they'll just make the repairs and move on. That's what happened to us with one of our seminaries in Ukraine, in Irpin. They blew it up, and we were able to get it to put back together within the next 3-4 months. So yeah, it's a tough situation. I mean, again, the countries of the former Soviet Union were all conquered and held together by force by the communist government. And then when the wall came down, all those countries went off on their own and established their own sovereignty and their own governments. And so Putin didn't agree with that. And he still thinks that I think he's trying to put the band back together so they could go back to what it was like during the communist years. But that's not going to happen. And so that's creating a lot of friction between some of the countries that are either aligned with Russia or aligned with the West.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I didn't know much about the countries that were right there around Ukraine that were concerned much about Russia, keeping their march going. But now we're hearing more and more European countries are afraid that Russia is not going to stop its invasions of other countries. I mean,
Yeah.
people in Germany, we've heard that the German military is building back up because they're worried about an invasion in Germany. There's a lot of talk about that right now. And there's a lot of European countries that are worried about, like Poland and other European countries that are worried about Russia, continuing not only a direct invasion, but now we're hearing more and more about them worried about Russia just causing, problems within their country through terrorism or things like that. And so we're hearing about more and more people worried about that march. But in 1994 was the Budapest Agreement. And so I guess there's a lot of people most people in Ukraine were around during that time. So most of them are aware of the geopolitical problems that came out of that agreement. Is that what you're referring to a minute ago?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, one of the last times I flew to that part of the country, we typically fly through Warsaw. And and on into either Ukraine or Moldova or Belarus or some of the other countries. We haven't been traveling into Russia because, it's kind of like the Hotel California. You can get in, but but on the other end, you can check out, but you can never leave, right?
Right, right.
So, so, but the last time I went through, there was just a military deployment. It seemed in the airport, and the airport was flooded with American troops. So, we have a strong presence there militarily to protect those countries. And again, part of the feeling was that, once Putin finishes up with Ukraine, then it's Moldova, it's Poland, it's Lithuania, some of the other countries in that region that he's going to go after as well. So the United States is taking a very active war in defending the sovereignty of those Eastern European countries.
How many ministers work out of the Slavic Gospel Association? How many ministers, I guess maybe some of them, I'm only assuming, I guess some of them are volunteers, maybe some of them are paid. I don't know whether you can differentiate between the two, but how many ministers are working out of the Slavic Gospel Association, if that's the way to put it, that are over there, boots on the ground?
Yeah. Again, we don't send missionaries over there. We're connected with an organization of churches called the Eurasian Baptist Federation. That's the Association of Baptist Churches. It was established back in the early 1800s. There was revival that took place in those countries, and it was established in Ukraine from German Mennonite missionaries that came into Ukraine and Georgia to evangelize the peasant populations. And so the Lord, breathed life into that movement, and there was a revival that took place throughout Ukraine and some of the surrounding nations in the 1800s. And then, of course, in the early 20th century, that's when the persecution started. So the pastors, the church workers of those churches were persecuted. Many of them were killed for their faith, and they lost a lot of fellow believers during those years. But now we serve the remnant of those churches that emerged from that period. They're strong, vital, brave, courageous people who are out, preaching the gospel and starting new churches and leading people to Christ. So again, I mean, our connection to those churches are the Baptist evangelical churches. We meet on a regular basis through this large organization, and we meet the leaders. We continue to meet with the leaders of all those countries, and we ascertain their needs. We help them with their strategy. We help them with financial support so that they can be equipped to reach more people throughout their nations. And so for us, the only thing we ask from them is financial accountability, because we transfer millions and millions of dollars into those countries. Is financial accountability, and then the stories about the lives that are being impacted for eternity as a result of our partnership with their churches. So basically, our boots on the ground are the pastors and the church workers of the churches that we sponsor and support in those nations.
This is really interesting that you said this revival has been going on in Europe since the 1800s.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's, I didn't have an idea, but I guess, when you think about the founding of America, and hundreds of years ago, when the Pilgrims came over here, they were looking for religious freedom,
Mm-hmm.
in America. They were, it wasn't just about freedom, it was about religious freedom and religious rights that they did not have in Europe. Does that movement that you're referring to that really was sparked in the 1800s, that became the movement that you referred to a few minutes ago in Europe? Did it start even before that? Were the 1800s when it became officially organized as an organization, or do you think that movement might have been parallel or around the same time frame as the revivals that were happening when people came over to America? Maybe I'm stretching a little bit.
Yeah,
Maybe I'm just kind of trying to see if there's any connection there to that same.
Yeah. Well, many years ago, that part of the world was known as the word Rus. Obviously short for Russian. And the capital of Rus, what was now modern day Kiev. Okay. And so back in those days, the leader, the king of Rus, wanted to unify the nation around a specific religion. So he sent the emissaries out to evaluate the various religions. So they sent the guy to Rome. He came back and talked about the beauty of the Catholic Church, but they couldn't adopt Catholicism because it would have been a sovereignty issue for them. They would have to be subjected to Rome. They looked at the Muslim population. They looked at some of the things there. They rejected that because of the prohibition against the consumption of alcohol. I mean, what good Russian could make it through the Russian winter without the fruit of the potato? And so then they sent an emissary to Istanbul, what is now Istanbul, and they went to the Church of Saint Sophia, and they evaluated the Orthodox Church, and they came back, and that's when they adopted Orthodox Christianity in that particular part of the world, and that was one of the things that unified the people throughout those conquered nations. So, and so basically, Russia missed the Reformation. And it wasn't until, the early 1800s when German Mennonite missionaries came into those countries and began to evangelize the peasant populations. And that's where the current Protestant evangelical Baptist movement took hold. And the Baptists are pretty well respected in those countries, even though, many of them are sort of closed to religion. The good works. I mean, people speak very well of them. I mean, they're solid citizens. They're not drunkards, and they just do their acts of mercy. I mean, we connect with them, with this Orphans Reborn program, and they are ministering to thousands and tens of thousands of orphans on a regular basis by simply being invited into the state-run orphanages, minister to the kids, lead them to Christ. And the issue there is that somebody did a study about what happens to those children when they grow up in those orphanages, and they just release them on their 18th birthday. And so the numbers came back that 97% of those kids are lost. Prostitution, alcoholism, suicide. I mean, it's just a bad, bad situation. So what we've been able to do is equip workers to go into many, many, many orphanages throughout those countries, connect with the kids, build relationships with the kids, lead many of them to Christ. So when on their 18th birthday, they force them out of the orphanages, they're not forced into a life of crime and and loneliness. They're connected to local churches that will then grab them and help them to develop a life that is productive, that is pleasing to God, and help them with their spiritual growth. So as through that program, where these kids are actually growing up in these orphanages, where these workers are coming in literally just about every week, ministering to these kids, many, many children have been saved. So there is freedom in those countries to be able to share the gospel, plant churches, disciple children. We wouldn't be able to go into state-run orphanages here in America. So there's more, in many senses, there's more freedom there than we have here in that regard. So yeah, I think it's their witness.
I'm gonna rewind for just a couple seconds here. What countries are you referring to again that are about with the orphanages? And are we seeing? And I'm getting a point here that are those orphanages in Ukraine that you're referring to?
Yes. There are many orphanages in Ukraine where we have supported workers from local churches in those regions to go in and do exactly what I told you. And that is, minister to the kids, build relationships with the kids. They have wonderful relationships with the orphanage directors, so that these children growing up can hear a clear presentation of the gospel and lead a productive life, as opposed to the fate of most of the children that graduate from those orphanages on their 18th birthday. Yes.
Now, the reason I did a rewind and help you clarify that is because there's a narrative going around in America, maybe you've heard it, where they said that Russia is really the good guys because they're going into the Ukraine. The Ukraine has these orphanages where they're selling children and putting children into sex slavery. So Russia is going in and freeing those orphanages. So Russia is really the good guy. I don't know if you've heard that narrative or not.
Yeah, I've heard that. I heard that on
And
both sides of it, both sides of the story. I have not heard. I'm not aware of one specific incident in Ukraine that would match what you're saying. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen, because there's a large criminal element in all of those countries, and it's one of those things where in some situations, like in Russia, I've been to orphanages where, we support workers that are in the orphanages, ministering to the kids. And then down the hall, the, Russian criminal element is in recruiting, the girls and the boys, grooming them. So when they do leave the orphanage, they'll just put them on the street and go to work for them. So yes, there are situations like that.
so what's interesting is you've just now kind of debunked that conspiracy with some let me just say some different information, where the narrative that I've heard several people that, the Ukrainian war is not what it's supposed to be. You all think Ukraine's the good guys, but they're harboring and selling children, and the Russians are freeing them. But just now you said that you've worked in these orphanages where you've seen Russians that are grooming children that are actually
Not in Ukraine, in Russia.
in Russia. Okay. All right.
Right. Yeah.
So you've seen this happening in Russia, but not in the Ukraine.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I did that intentionally because I want to make it resonate on people's minds where they're seeing it. So, that narrative basically is somewhat debunked, that, that Russia's not necessarily freeing children in the Ukraine in these orphanages. In fact, they might be on the other side of the narrative that we're hearing.
Yes,
Possibly.
I mean, I can't make a blanket definitive statement because, there's a lot of regions in Ukraine that have been conquered, in the midst of this war. So there could be some of that happening in Ukraine, but I can't cite a specific example of it right now.
But what I like about not only your information, but by you clarifying what we just now talked about, it kind of, and I don't want to use the word debunked again, but it kind of unravels that narrative, which is what I'm always fighting on my show, is that there's always these narratives that people will adhere to the narrative instead of trying to find the truth. And Michael, one of the reasons why I brought you on my show is because you have a lot of truth about you that unravels the narratives in a way that shows the good things that your ministry is doing in a war-torn area, in the case of the Ukraine, where you're actually have people in those orphanages and in the communities that are saving people from not only the destruction of war, but also the destruction of their eternal souls.
Correct.
Because you all are monitoring these situations and helping prevent some of the narratives that are happening elsewhere. Would that be the right way for me to say it?
Yes. No, absolutely. I think you're spot on. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So
and so real quick, so that means that we have a program, we provide transportation, we provide financial support for the workers, we provide a lot of the things that they need to be able to go in and minister to those kids, and we can do that at a cost of roughly $30 per year per kid.
So for the people that are hooked on the narrative that Russia's the good guy coming in saving people in the orphanages in the Ukraine, the reality is the Slavic Gospel Association is really the warriors that they could support, because you all have boots on the ground through your ministry that's actually saving these children from the orphanage before they get released, in a way that if they helped the Slavic Gospel Association, they could be helping more of those children, regardless of who or regardless of what country they think is good or bad.
Correct. Yeah. And we have access to tens of thousands of children through our network. So who are in
Do you
those
have any good
situations.
stories you could share with that?
I don't see, I didn't bring my list of stories,
That's
so
okay. We're gonna do that again
just
sometime.
yeah. We can do that another time, and I can, because the stories are pretty compelling. When those kids are dropped off and they don't have any parents, and the impact that those church workers have on them in their lives is just something that is amazing. And it literally is the hand of God working in those orphanages through these workers.
Are there any other stories that can come to your mind that the people, the boots on the ground guys? I'm saying that, and I'm not trying to make a joke. Boots on the ground. I mean, they're warriors for God, but they're in a country that's going through war. And while I thought before today that that you're hiring these ministers, from America and sending them into the Ukraine, I didn't realize before today that you all have been in there, like you said, since the 1800s, pretty much.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so these are the people that are there are either from the Ukraine or they're from a surrounding area that they
Mhm.
feel comfortable being in there because they can speak the language.
Mhm.
What stories are these people sharing about these war-torn areas that we're not hearing in the media? Are there some things that you can share?
Well, I mean, we support a couple of guys, Vlad and his partner, in the eastern part of Ukraine, in the Donbass, and that's where the fighting appears to be the worst. And so these guys drive around in their armored vehicle, dressed in their fatigues, and their armored vehicles are all loaded up with humanitarian aid, medical supplies, heaters, food, clothing, because the people that are in the midst of that very intense war in eastern Ukraine are just totally isolated. And these guys are just showing up. One of them had his car blown up and he survived. But they just keep going back and going back and going back and ministering to these kids. It's like they're in the middle of a war, only it's a war to save people's lives and not to take them. And
Right.
so these are the kind of people that we're connected to. They're willing to risk their lives to go in and, for the sake of the gospel, to minister to these people who are just completely lost and completely hopeless. And so it's a real privilege for us to be able to partner with these individuals. And there's many of them, because most of these people, they're all Christians. Many of them are trained pastors. We support the largest network of theological training centers throughout those countries. So we know that they're well grounded in God's word. And, it's just amazing,
What are they sharing with you? I'm sure they are. Like we hear how much of the electrical grid has been shut down because of the amount of electrical power plants that have been destroyed. But what kind of living conditions are they coming back with? I mean, the Ukrainian people are very resilient, from what I
Yeah.
understand.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
what are they sharing with you? I mean, like how much, they're bringing humanitarian relief in there, but what are they coming
Mhm.
back and saying? Look, we saw this, this
Yeah.
community or whatever that you're hearing.
Well, they continue to send the drones and the missiles in to Ukraine to blow up their power stations. And so that's affecting a large percentage of the population. So basically, these people are getting up in the morning and they don't have any heat in their house. They don't have any power, and so for us, what we've been doing is raising money to send generators to the churches, so that, because the churches, they don't have any heat either. So the churches could, heat the building up so that those people that are without heat can come and connect and, get warm and get something to eat and, some refreshment and, spend time with prayer with people. Um, and it's kind of a respite, if you will. And so we call these churches centers of heat and hope. because you can come and get warm, but also you can come and experience the hope of Christ that only comes through his gospel. And these churches are just lights in the community. And so when they blow up the power stations, very little that somebody living in a apartment building or somewhere else can do to rectify the situation. And that's why the churches are reaching out and giving them a place to come, a place of respite, and a place of warmth, and a place of hope.
As we start to walk out of the interview, as we start to wrap up here, do you feel or see or hear from the people that are in the communities, the ministers that are working through your organization in the communities, are they coming back with signs of hope from the people of Ukraine? Are the Ukrainians ready to give up? If a political agreement of some sort is not reached, where President Trump is able to pull off some peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine, the war's going to continue. And then, of course, we see all the grandstanding. Of course, when Trump tells Zelensky that without us, your country's people are going to keep dying. We hear the big talk. We know Russia's continuing to march, and Ukrainian people are in a squeeze play. But are your ministers coming back saying, these people have hope, they have a lot of life left in them, they're going to continue fighting? Or are they coming back saying they're ready to give up? Or because of the ministers and the Slavic Gospel Association and the hope it's bringing through God and through prayer, is that holding people together? What are you seeing? Are they giving up? Are they continuing?
No, they're not giving up. No, the Ukrainian people are not giving up. They're very resilient. And they live day to day, not knowing what's going to happen in the future. Obviously, they're tracking what's happening on the political side, hoping that there will be that the war will end, and we're praying for the end of the war. But this has been dragging on for so long. I think in most people's minds that at this point there's no end in sight. So unless something significant happens. And so we're praying for President Trump. We're praying for President Zelensky. We're praying for our politicians that they would be able to come up with a solution that is lasting. And because that's the only way, that's the only solution to the problem.
One last time, how can people help your organization? This organization, you started in the 1930s, but it looks like the foundation of your organization started, in the 1800s from the movement and the belief of the people and everything. So it's not like this is not like an organization that just started to help the Ukrainian people. This is an organization that the Ukraine mission is really just a side mission from your overall mission over 100 years. How can people help more? What can people do?
Well, you can come to our website, sga.org, and if you're interested in helping address the blowing up of the power plants in Ukraine, we have a program called Heat and Hope, and the money that we raise through that campaign is going toward the purchase of generators to warm the churches, but also coal and wood and other things that we can send to the individual homes so that people can experience some warmth temporarily, but at least we're helping in some way. But we're there as a ministry because of our love for those countries and the love not only on the Ukrainian side but the Russian side as well. There's wonderful godly people in Russia that we support too. So yeah, any help we can get is something that was very much appreciated, and you can be assured that when we make a commitment to get money over there, we're able to do that and get the reports back of how the funds are being used to advance the gospel in those countries and meet people's physical needs. And because again, we have infrastructure over there, supply chain over there, we can get resources anywhere, throughout those countries. And Russia is 11.5 time zones long. We have an aviation ministry out in Far East Russia where they're flying up above the Arctic Circle, delivering aid to people living up there in these remote villages. So we have a wide number of tentacles out there, ministry tentacles that we're able to employ to get the word out.
So you guys are basically helping the victims of these war-torn areas and around the globe, like you said, that have been the victims of the war. And these are and let me say this: these victims are the casualties that help Putin advance, because when they have the more innocent casualties they have, the more ground they gain. I mean, it's common sense sounding, but
I guess so.
you all, the Slavic Gospel Association, in essence, becomes the enemy because you all are helping these victims survive, which keeps Putin from gaining more ground, if you will. Is that a way to look at it?
I guess that's a way of looking at it. Yeah. I mean, you asked about what's happening in Ukraine, like in the churches, for example. When the war started, most of the pastors and most of the Christians left and, immigrated to Eastern Europe. But now the churches are just flourishing. And the majority of the people in those churches are either new Christians or new members. So, Christ is building his church in Ukraine in the midst of this war and the remains of these missiles that are going in and blowing buildings up. So
warriors at war, you're creating warriors of resilience and God.
Right. That's true.
Faith.
That's a good way of looking at it. Absolutely.
I love it. Well,
Absolutely.
Michael, thank you so much for being on the show today. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your information. I think it was a unique blend of what people needed to hear to help clear up a couple of the narratives, at least. I love, what you shared about the orphanages, and I hope to have you back on soon. And we'll talk about some of those. I'll get you on for some of those individual stories.
Okay, great. I'll make sure that I'm prepared with them, because I got a whole stack of them.
All right. Well,
Okay.
Thank you very much, Michael. And I want to thank the listeners. Hang on one second, Michael. Well, I thank the listeners. Appreciate your time on the show, but also I'd appreciate it if you visited the Wellness Company. They're a company that believes in not only your health, but your medical freedom. Go visit them at twc.health. Use that promo code WWFA for a discount. Thank you so much. And the next show's coming up here very soon.